What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be talking about some of the new specialists that they revealed late last week and why I am a little bit worried about these specialists and their abilities. I was actually planning on making this as soon as we heard about the specialists, but I did just kind of want to sit on it for a few days and not only go over my own thoughts on it, but also to see what the rest of the community are thinking, as it is always pretty telling to see how you feel compared to everyone else. And what I noticed was that pretty much everyone in the community seems to be on the same page on this one. Before we get into it, if you guys are new to the channel, then consider subscribing and turning on those notifications. But with that being said, let's get stuck right into it. So obviously, like I said, there are 5 new specialists that they revealed to us on, I think, Friday last week, at least here in Australia anyway. And while 3 of those specialists seemed really solid to me and I'm excited to get my hands on them at launch, some of those specialists seem to be bordering on broken already. Ji-Soo Paik, who is the South Korean specialist, she has a specialty called the emg-x scanner, and as you can see in this gameplay, it is quite literally a wall hack built into the game. Now obviously that makes it sound way worse than it actually is, but at face value it's plain and simple that this is pretty much just a wall hack with obvious limitations, like obviously it's going to have a shorter timer and a long recharge time, as well as probably a few other limitations. But yeah, at first glance this immediately looked pretty broken. Not only that, but she also then has a trait that reveals enemies who have damaged you. I'd imagine it doesn't really last that long, and there might even be a distance limitation, for example, but as you can see in this gameplay, it does cause those enemies to stand out quite a bit. Wall hack aside, this ability on its own I'm completely fine with, so long as it's not too OP obviously, but if it just shows them for like 1 or 2 seconds, then I think I'm completely okay with that. But when it is paired with the emg-x scanner as well, I think that is definitely just a little bit too much awareness for one player to have. Now I have seen a lot of counter arguments to these abilities, and again, keep in mind I'm really only talking about this scanner, as her trait is just completely fine by me. But a lot of people were saying, well, maybe it only lasts a few seconds, or maybe it's just got a super short range on it. And while yes, those types of limitations are definitely going to help it stay a little bit more balanced, at its core it is still a broken feature within the game. This is an effect that people literally have been hacking for in games like Warzone being the most recent example, but obviously wall hacks have been around forever, and for all that time they've always been seen as a clear cheating device and clearly give the player a huge advantage, which is exactly why those kinds of cheats are banned in essentially any shooter. Now I do understand that plenty of games have implemented abilities like this one. Bloodhound in Apex Legends is a prime example, and while many people do consider Bloodhound to be kind of OP, it seems to work relatively well in that game. If it was so broken it would have been removed, and so despite many people in the community saying that the emg-x scanner has to be removed, I'm actually not so sure about that myself, and I think I have a few ideas as to how they could fix it. We see in this gameplay clip that it obviously fully highlights the enemies, and that does seem to work on a pulse, so they don't actually stay highlighted permanently, and it also highlights them whether they're moving or not. Now one thing that could possibly improve the ability would be to maybe make it that anyone who's moving is somehow less visible. Maybe the heat signature is less accurate, so it's more like a red blur than an exact outline or something, just giving a rough idea of where they are rather than an exact location. While players who are camping, like the guy that we see in this gameplay clip, they are the only ones that get the completely highlighted body, as that would make this ability slightly more of a, I guess, camper locator than a just straight up wall hack. And to be honest, I'd be fine with campers being shown like this guy in the trailer, because that directly counters how frustrating it is when people just sit in the corner like that. I think they could also make the actual pulse effect of the scanner much more of a focal point, so rather than it showing the enemy for a few seconds, it literally just outlines them in the position they were when it scanned them. So if someone's sprinting, for example, it'll just show quickly a static image of where they were, but then obviously if they've moved, then you technically don't know where they are still. You just know that they're somewhere nearby, giving you an advantage but not giving you a live ping through the wall, if that makes sense. I think the main issue that I have with the clip they showed us was that the highlighted players stay highlighted for so long, and it gave her enough time to actually take out 2 enemies while the third guy is still visible. Now that third guy, he does actually go off the scanner for a bit in the middle there, which I assume is just to do with the pulse, so each pulse might highlight you for 2 seconds, for example, but the issue with that is if it keeps pulsing, it's just giving you constant information and awareness. So the combination of the 1 to 2 seconds of being highlighted and then the constant pulses as well, I think that's where the issue mostly lies for me. I think it either has to do 1 pulse and highlight enemies for 1 to 2 seconds, or it needs to do multiple pulses, but it just shows essentially a still image of where they were when the pulse passed over them, meaning that, like I said earlier, if the player is sprinting, they will be in a different spot when you actually get to them, and that can just give them a slight chance to survive the gunfight, despite the fact that you do still have the advantage. Now, I think on top of any of those sorts of changes, there does need to be some indication for the players who are actually spotted that they've been scanned and they are currently under threat, just to at least even the playing field a little bit. Now, this isn't going to make the ability useless, as they still have no idea where Ji-Soo Ji-Soo is. So Ji-Soo still has the advantage, therefore the ability is still pretty decent, but it just gives the enemy players some sort of chance, which I think is needed not only for this ability, but pretty much for any ability in the game. Other than those obvious things like a headshot from a sniper, a tank shooting at you, just those obvious one-hit kill situations, everything else in the game does need to be balanced enough that you can at least have a chance to survive whatever it is. For example, even if the time to kill is too fast to where you just can't even react before you die, then that's OP as well, and that same principle goes for the specialists and their gadgets as well. I'm definitely interested to see how they try and balance this ability out a bit. To play devil's advocate, it honestly might just look OP because we saw a 5-second clip showing it off, which was obviously designed to make all the abilities look awesome, so maybe it's not as bad as we're making it out to be, but I am just definitely a little bit worried about it as of right now, just going off of what we've seen. Now moving on to Dozer just quickly before we end the video, his ballistic shield is also able to deflect bullets back at the enemy and deal damage, and once again I think that is super frustrating already, and it does not need to be in the game at all. I hear so many comments of people saying, oh duh, just don't shoot at him, and while yeah, that is the obvious fix for the players, it's just not as simple as that. That is essentially the equivalent of saying, well, if you see a tank, just run away because you can't beat them, when in reality they've put countermeasures in the game in terms of gadgets in order for you to defeat the tank, and shooting a tank with a rocket launcher doesn't deflect that rocket launcher back at you, does it? Dozer should be able to absorb damage with the riot shield, and even in combination with the explosive resistance, I think that is completely fine. It'll be a bit annoying, sure, but I think that is pretty well balanced. But as soon as he can turn those shots back onto you, it is borderline weaponizing a shield, which is literally the opposite of what a shield is meant to do, unless of course you can get close enough to bash the enemy with it. What happens in Hazard Zone when you're in a super intense gunfight and you've seen only 3 of the enemies, so you don't know the Dozer's there, and then maybe you take some damage from a grenade and you're on 10 health with the game on the line, and then he walks around the corner only for you to quickly shoot him out of habit, because the logical thing to do when you see an enemy is to quickly react and shoot them, and bang, he's just killed you by crouch walking with essentially a 0% chance of death since you can't counter it at all, and there you go, your game is now over. Those are the type of situations we need to be thinking about in terms of balancing, not the simplest of situations where it's a 1v1 and you can just simply not shoot him. I know many of you guys have played Battlefield forever, and so have I, but for those who don't know, I actually started on YouTube in the Battlefront 2 community over on my other channel. Now, in Battlefront 2, this exact ability was possible in the form of blocking with a lightsaber, where no one from in front of you could deal any damage whatsoever, and you could deal all of that damage back onto those enemies. It's simple on paper to say don't shoot them, but after 3,000 hours in that game, I can safely say that is not how it works. They literally had to nerf certain characters like Vader about 20 times in that game, because when somebody becomes too tanky, they're just always going to be OP in one way or another. The thing with Battlefront 2 is that the Saber heroes also had stamina, so if you shot them enough when they were blocking, then they would actually lose the ability to block, and then they're the ones in trouble. But with a riot shield, is that going to be the case for Dozer, or will he be able to use it for essentially an unlimited amount of time? In my opinion, if they just simply remove the ability to deflect shots, then Dozer becomes very well balanced right away. I really don't understand why that ability is there, to be honest, but in saying that, just like I said with the Ji-Soo stuff, maybe they just didn't give us enough of an idea. Maybe the shield does have some sort of stamina level for how long Dozer can carry it, or maybe it breaks after X amount of damage, for example, so we are still going to have to wait and see. But if that's the case, I feel like they probably should have shown some of that stuff in the trailers so that we don't all just start freaking out like this. At the end of the day, these two are probably the only characters I really have an issue with, and so luckily I do think they are going to be easy enough to balance if DICE actually do decide to do that, and because of that I am definitely confident that after all this feedback the community is giving them, they hopefully will listen to us like they have with many other topics and just slightly tone down the abilities. Like I said, I'm actually not in the camp that thinks they need to completely remove the emg-x scanner or anything drastic like that. I think it all comes down to the balancing in order to just keep it in line, and so it is definitely going to be interesting to watch in these last couple of weeks before launch to see if they do decide to change any of this stuff or whether they stick to their guns on it. Let me know down in the comments how you guys feel about not only Ji-Soo and Dozer but the rest of the specialists as well. It definitely seems to be a very interesting topic right now, so I am very keen to hear what you guys have to say about it. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you are new, then consider subscribing and turning on those notifications. If you guys want to support the content that I make here on YouTube, then consider becoming a channel member. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.